Thanks for tuning into this episode of FinTech Focus TV, powered by Harrington Star, the global leaders in financial technology recruitment. Head over to the Harrington Star website where you'll be able to find all the latest jobs in financial technology across the globe. You'll also be able to download the latest issue of the Financial Technologist magazine, including the Top 1% Workplace Awards. Finally, if you're looking to grow your team, please get in touch. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb. Today I am absolutely delighted to introduce you and welcome into the studio, Brian Harkin. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Toby. Right, thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Listen, great to have you in here, and we're going to be talking all things DigitalXform, the business you've recently launched, and find out where you're going with all of that. We've got a load to talk about with regards to the transformation. You gave me some stats that blew my head on Friday last week, and I can't wait to dive into all of that and find out a little bit more about what you've been doing. You've got a book underway at the moment.
I have, yeah.
The Labour of Love. Was it signed off on Friday?
It's being signed off on, when are we? Probably Wednesday this week.
so we're nearly there with all of that, and I can't wait to find out a little bit more, and we'll have you back on when we've actually got the physical copy. I'd love to talk a little bit more about that as well. But loads and loads to get into at the moment and find out a little bit more about you. But before we do all of that, Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself and the business.
So my name is Brian Harkin, and I'm the founder of DigitalXform, digital transformation consultancy, and I've created the Galapagos framework. So it's a framework to help organisations be more successful with transformational change. And as you've mentioned, that the book's due to be published on the framework in Q1 next year. I'm a technologist by trade, so started my career at IBM, moved into retail banking, asset management and investment banking, initially within a technology context, but then moving into senior leadership positions.
It's a pretty impressive CV that you've got. There was a roster of some powerful names on that CV in the past as well. Yeah. So having done that and having gone through those sort of, that big corporate sort of background and worked with some of the giants that you have, what sort of flipped the switch for you to say that this is something which I need to do and this is the right time? You've been, as you say, held some senior leadership positions, saw the opportunity to be doing something different. What was it that sort of said, I have to do this now? So
I saw the failure rate of digital transformations globally, and that's running at about 70%, right? So 70% failure rate is massive, right? And it sort of aligned with my own experience, and I've been through the wars, and so I've got plenty of practical experience to bring to bear in this domain. So I had a look. I thought 70%. What is this? What is that? What does this actually translate to? And 70% failure rate globally annually will translate to $2.6 trillion a year that are wasted. And again, these numbers are so big that it's difficult to get your head around.
That's sterling, right? Pound sterling.
No, that's dollars.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at if you're looking at numbers that big, it's the currency almost irrelevant. Yeah. But to try and put that into context, that's double the UK's spending on public services in 2023. It's the other stat that got me was it could fund NASA for 95 years.
Is that right? I love who comes up with those stats.
I know, but it could solve world hunger and still have $1.9 trillion left over, right? So these numbers are astronomical, right? And I've designed the Galapagos framework to solve for the problems that I've seen in digital transformation, right? And I've approached the problem differently. So it's a more human-centric approach to transformational change, and we cover within the framework itself. We cover organisational dimensions, the delivery dimension, and of course the human dimension. It is rare that a digital transformation will fail solely due to technology. They mostly fail because the humans, whether that be your internal staff, your customers, your suppliers, other third parties, are not at the centre of the change story. So if you put the human at the centre of the change story, you have got a much better chance of success.
So I worked with an agile consultancy 5-6 years ago, and they always used to talk about winning hearts and minds as the predominant part of it. And I think the headline number there is phenomenal, right? And you can almost see it happening in government at the moment with HS2 and everything that's just been announced recently in the last couple of weeks or so. So when we're looking at this sort of thing, and you say, right, you're looking at the problem, which is a pronounced problem, and it's a problem which can save companies millions, if not billions and trillions, as we've been speaking about before. And even if it's not a large company talking about millions, you're talking about thousands, tens of thousands, and hundreds of thousands beyond that, based off people who are going through and putting the best intention at the start of a program and a project that goes through. So when you're looking at this and you're saying, right, this is how we solve the problem from this, and I imagine that when it's a $2.6 trillion issue, you're talking there about something which I doubt you're the only person who's recognised it as as an issue out there in the marketplace. And people have been chipping away at it, and it's a tale as old as time, effectively, since we've been looking at this sort of thing, and it hasn't necessarily been solved so far. Tell me about your view on how the Galapagos framework can actually solve the problem and take it further forward.
It's a cracking question, right? And a lot of the big consultancies are in this space, right? But again,
they almost don't want to do it because it makes them money, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. We talk about the dimensions of change. Yeah. So if you look at the human dimension, so that's predominantly culture, communication, and skills. Many organisations don't foster a culture that is conducive to effective transformational change. Right? So they don't cultivate a high degree of collaboration. They don't tolerate a failing fast approach or failure at any level. And if you don't allow people to fail, you don't give them psychological safety, which means that you're missing out in many ways, but you're missing out in creativity, innovation. So just from a cultural perspective, organisations are falling almost at the first hurdle if they don't have a culture in place. Communication, we've all seen this, right? Where the people that are at the heart of delivery are drowning in a sea of communication, emails, instant messages, video conferences, telcos, instant messages, the list goes on, right? And the perceived wisdom is that, more communication is better. That's incorrect, right? That's clearly wrong, right? Because you have a direct and tangible negative impact on delivery due to just the sheer volume of information that's being sent towards your delivery function, your transformation function. The final strand on the human dimension is skills. Lots of organisations embark on digital transformations without doing a sober assessment of their current capabilities, right? So, do they have the right skills to conduct effective change? Do they have the right number of skills? Do they have the right number of the right skills in the right locations, right? And often they would head off down the digital transformation path without actually conducting that analysis of their existing capability. So that's just the human side. From an organisational perspective, and I've seen this before numerous times, is that organisations can be siloed, right? Heavily siloed, and this makes transformational change more difficult, right? Because people are in their own little fiefdoms, and they are not working effectively as a unit. If you then combine that with, there is a common perception that digital transformations, it's an IT problem, and so it's thrown over the fence of the IT function, right? and not necessarily with the clear, unambiguous, and most importantly, visible backing of the CEO, right? So you have a position where you're in a position whereby you've got the technology function driving a strategically important transformational change. Probably not right. It needs to be an overarching group that looks at this, and for one reason or another, the CEOs are reluctant to get too closely involved with transformational change, possibly because of this 70% failure rate. They don't want to
associate themselves with that area.
So they could tarnish.
Do you think that's actually a part of it?
I would think that's quite an important part of why the CEOs tend to hand it off to other functions to deliver.
It's a crazy lack of ownership.
You would think, from when you're spending, many tens, hundreds of millions on a transformation initiative, you would want your CEO at the helm, or at least if he's not running it, be seen to be communicating that this is strategically important for the entire business. So that helps bring people along in the journey, make sure that you don't encounter too much resistance to change. The list goes on. The final strand is delivery. So organisations believe or have been advised that the best way to achieve successful transformation is to adopt a wholesale organisational approach to the change, and that's wrong, right? And the reason it's wrong is because with these large wholesale organisational change initiatives, they require a huge amount of upfront analysis, planning, decisions taken that are probably 6, 9, 12 months, maybe longer. You're essentially placing a bet that this far down the road, all the assumptions and decisions that you made at the start are remain the same, and that's clearly, in a fast-moving digital world, that's clearly not the case. And so this approach to the problem is costly and very ineffective, because the increased level of parallelism that you conduct in your transformation. So you've got lots and lots of parallel streams of work, often interdependent, and increasing parallelism is never free. And increasing parallelism, even by a small amount, increases the risk profile of delivery in an exponential way. So the Galapagos framework approaches this from an entirely different way. So it advocates that you have a discrete, dedicated innovation environment called the island, that's made up of a coalition of the willing, and they are tasked with delivering on the transformation in the most effective and efficient way possible. They have got everything that they need to succeed, and at a stroke, that solves the main issues on the human dimension, because the leadership function of the island can create a highly collaborative, highly secure environment for where fear of failure doesn't exist, and so you create an environment where innovation and creativity thrive. You break down silos because it's a cross-functional, lots of cross-functional teams operating in unison to deliver on the same objective, and you don't try and boil the ocean. You tackle one discrete area of the business and you transform that, and then move on to the next. So
it's iterative,
massively iterative, but also counterintuitively. Intuition says running things in parallel gets you to your end goal faster. Right? It doesn't. Right? And I've been through this a number of times. Right? Well, what inevitably happens is that scope is reduced, and delivery to the business is impacted because the interdependencies between many parallel streams of work are not fully understood, and it's impossible in a large and complex business environment to fully understand those 6, 9, 12 months ahead of delivery. It's just not possible.
Isn't it fascinating to think like that? And going back, sticking with a couple of analogies that are outside the digital world that sort of staying as, for example, with HS2, that was a long multi-year project. Mm-hmm. And for numerous different reasons, the costs have soared on the basis of that to move it to a failed, effectively what will become a failed project in its sorts, no matter what sort of spin gets put on it politically in whichever way, shape or form. But I think it's so difficult to sort of plan and project for that. The intentions are always great behind that. The execution is somewhat different. So I'm also looking at a friend of mine who's got a fairly significant property development project going on that started pre-COVID, and costs of materials soared there afterwards. Yeah. And I think people look at things and they see a sort of spreadsheet before an event and don't actually build in enough fat for these sort of things. So when you're talking about that, and then suddenly when that comes in, the pressure comes into it, and it's cheaper to scrap it rather than to sort of force through and go down that sort of route. And I think there are so many different, when you're sat there and you're talking about the sort of scoping of the plans and the headcount needed and the growth element and how, what, where and when, it's that input beforehand that's seems so brilliantly straightforward, doesn't it? That just makes it.
It's exactly that. It looks great on a plan, right?
Yeah.
This looks totally achievable, right? But there are external factors outside of your immediate control, outside of your company's control that
volatility. We're in a period of massive volatility, right?
And it's global volatility, right? And we talk about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, right? This theory once only applied to businesses is actually. It's in our day-to-day life. Right? Yeah. It's the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity of business. And that's impacted. It's in day-to-day life. It's not just in the business world anymore. And placing these large bets for upfront is never, regardless of whether it's a digital transformation or the building of a high-speed rail, right? We can never anticipate every eventuality, and leaving it to some program director to put, we'll add 20% on, that'll cover most of the problems. These arbitrary figures that are added on to cover contingency scenarios. When you're running a strategically important initiative, it just seems the wrong way to go. So and I advocate this in the framework as well, that we do short iterative cycles, but all decision making is metrics driven, right? So it's data driven decision making is the right way forward, but you can only data drive your decisions if you actually move. You can't do it at the planning stage. You have to be in transit before you get those feedback loops. And then once you're in that cycle of getting proper data being fed back to allow you to make or change course or change tack and make adjustments to the way in which you're executing your transformation or your large program of delivery, that's the right way forward. You can't anticipate every eventuality up front, and thereby the framework advocates iterative cycles, metrics driven, data driven decision making, and constant course correction at speed as and when required, because then you're insulating yourself from external factors that you may not be able to anticipate up front.
I think the interesting thing about that data piece as well is how often people use data in the wrong way. So I'm fascinated by this at the moment, in the fact that data is such a powerful tool for business. But people, quite often, I had this really interesting conversation last week with someone out in the States, that people will utilise data to validate their own thought processes, and they look for the data to feed their assumptions straight away. So I guess the ability for you to come in there and sort of myth bust and give real data and counter arguments to the arguments that people want to build the narrative around is really important as well.
I mean, we've all seen it before, where people find the data that backs up their position, right? And ultimately, you have to take a step outside of this, and this is why creating an innovation environment within your organisation that's almost separate, right? But retains links back into the parent organisation is so important, because you dispense with the ego in politics drive fear, right? And you dispense with that by creating an environment that is open and honest and friendly, right?
Yeah.
And I have done throughout my career. I pride myself on open, honest, and friendly communication at all times.
Yeah.
Right, because
it doesn't sound corporate, does it? That
no,
that's sometimes the issue, that when you hear friendly in a conversation where there's tens of billions of pounds being spent on it, or millions of pounds being spent on it, people look at it and say, well, why are we talking about friendly within that?
I know.
Right? But it's so important.
Completely, and this is about moving people forward in a collaborative way, right? And of course you're going to have difficult conversations. That's a given, right? And of course sometimes, right, you might snap, or
been there.
or maybe lose your patience, right? But then having the courage to go back and say, right, okay, sorry about that. Apologising in the corporate world is not acceptable, right? And you get this in leadership courses. Never apologise. That's I don't agree with that, because
so you want your money back if there's leadership courses that don't apologise.
I know. It's important. It's important for us as leaders to display a more human side, right? And sticking your hand up and saying, right, okay, I may have got that wrong, or I might have said that in the wrong way, is important, because it engenders loyalty, right? And when you're asking guys to put in the extra hours to get something across the line, you have to have that in your back pocket.
I think there's a really interesting piece that Red Arrow's doing this, so that they see debriefing as sacrosanct. So these are the best of the best of the RAF, who cycle through every 3 years, have new people coming through all the time. And you see the leader of the SAS, and I've managed to, been very fortunate to meet a couple of them and talk through how they do it. And they talk about starting off their debriefings by sort of criticising themselves first. So they take accountability and responsibility and make it that safe zone to then be able to do that afterwards. So, yeah, it's really interesting how you bring that sort of human leadership aspect into the whole party with it as well.
And this stems from, I mean, I've been a proponent of Agile for forever, right? But if you're looking at Scrum retrospectives, what did we do well? What did we do not so well? What could we do better next time? That sort of reflection, not necessarily on an individual basis, but on how we as a team could have done better. What could we have done? I'm very, very keen, and I mentioned this in the book, on the idea of team with a capital T, right? Collective success, collective failure. No individual succeeds or fails. The team succeeds or fails. That's it. And once you build that ethos within your operating environment with your teams, I find that they are much more effective. Right? It's important that as much pressure that is brought to bear on you to highlight individual failings, that as a leader you say, no, that we have failed. You don't single anybody out for special attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this whole world is so important right now, isn't it? I remember maybe 7-8 years ago, I went to a talk, and I was very fortunate to hit. I'm pretty sure his name is Benny Higgins, who was the head of Tesco Bank at the time. May still be, and a wonderful speaker, and quoting poetry and Keats and all this sort of stuff all the way through it. But he just captivated the audience, and he was talking about Tesco Bank changing the game a little bit. And one of the phrases that sort of stuck with me ever since was, it's not good enough to have a digital strategy, you need to have a strategy that's digital. And we've seen that sort of accelerate tenfold in the last 7 years. So 7 years ago it was fairly obvious, but still relatively revolutionary. Right now it's right at the centre of it, and that seems to me to have been, you've seen the sort of real rise to prominence of the CTO in the C-suite, which is was probably previously IT directors who were seen as the cost centre beforehand, something which I talk about a lot. And I think right now there is a need to do this, and as people are sort of seeing new technologies come in and flavours of the month, and when we're seeing digital transformation now sort of bring AI into it, and people are seeing this sort of massive potential of it, there's a big pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, which says fastest to that to utilise these tools is the winner. So first mover advantage, etc., etc. But I think that's wrapped with a bit of danger when you're looking at that through that manner, right?
Totally, because the technology landscape moves so quickly.
Yeah.
That again.
And only speeding up.
Yeah, you can't predict what. I mean, 18 months ago, nobody was talking about AI, right?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
you can't move everybody talking about AI. It's flavour of the month, right? And there'll be another, whether it's large language models or generative AI, there'll be other technologies, and this is why I've taken the framework in a different direction. But it's not technology based; it's human based, right? Organisations can use culture as a means of differentiation and how they excel in their market.
So we've got the human piece, we've got the organisational piece, and then the delivery aspect behind that. How does it all mesh together? So
the framework is based on this unit called the islands, and again, as I said, it's a discrete, dedicated innovation environment, essentially, that is filled with people who are passionate about change and passionate about effecting change in the best way possible. Staff build their own momentum, build their own motivation when they are succeeding, and small continual increments of successful delivery. In this instance, success breeds success. So we have the island, and then we have a structure around the island that allows the execution of transformational change in an efficient and effective way. And the output of all of this is a lightweight transformational operating model that says, look, for the next transformation that comes along, this is what we have learned, right? And because we are not placing these bets for 6, 12, 9 months ahead, we're placing them in short iterative steps. We encounter problems, and we fail fast, and we solve the problems, and we move forward. And because we are not adopting a linear approach to change, we derive benefit faster. So ultimately, that's what.
It's incredible, isn't it? And as you say, it's this straightforward way of just 50% of this being solved is transformational in terms of what can happen to the economies of where businesses are able to grow and thrive and strive and thrive. Talk to me a little bit about the name, so the Galapagos framework, etc. Where's it come from?
Okay. So the Galapagos Islands were where Charles Darwin conducted his research that led to the writing of The Origin of Species, and the unique biodiversity on those islands was created in no small part due to the fact of their geographic isolation. Darwin was a highly collaborative naturalist. He worked with others to refine his ideas, and his approach, it wasn't a flash of inspiration. It was evolved, if you pardon the pun. It was evolved over time, and in a non-linear path. And so, geographic isolation, high degree of collaboration, and transformations following a non-linear path are three of the key themes of the Galapagos framework, and that was
where it tied in.
That's why all of it.
And that was your brainchild to sort of come in with that and tie the two of them together.
It was, yeah.
Big Darwin fan.
It was evolutionary change, fast evolution of ideas, and I think, well, this is all about transformation. Then then you're reading up more on Darwin and discovering that his approach, and thinking actually this ties in nicely with a model for delivering transformational change at pace. Where he's talking about evolution over millennia, we're talking about evolution over very, very short time frames. So ideas that are fit for purpose win through, other ideas are cast aside quickly. And that approach of the fast evolution, fast A/B micro competitions, ultimately results in a better transformation.
So let's talk about the business. So the book's out at the start of next year, but day to day you're solving this problem one client at a time. One client at a time.
And that's it. It's all about it's all about building momentum, yeah. So and there are lots of organisations out there with heavily vested interests elsewhere. You know, I'm trying to change the way in which people think about transformation, and I'm doing this mostly through a sense of altruism. So the book's there. You know, if you want to pick up the book and read the book, you know, you'll have a very good starting place to move your transformation forward. But I want to create an environment where people feedback, and we can evolve the framework together, right? The reason it's a framework is because it's fairly light touch in how you should do things, because a digital transformation in financial services, which is my background, will be completely different from one that's in health tech or in agriculture or in manufacturing. They'll be very different beasts. However, the underlying principles will be the same regardless of the business domain within which the transformation is occurring.
And tell me who you can help. So I know this is something there where we're talking large scale, anywhere and everywhere, etc., etc. But when we look at DigitalXform, tell me who it is that you guys can be helping, that you can get to grips with, that you can make a material change for and save.
So that's a really good question. So the framework has been designed to be absolutely scalable. So it will scale from very small businesses to globally multinational businesses, globally distributed multinational businesses. For me personally, I want to help small guys be more effective. SMEs, small medium enterprises, So anybody who's struggling with transformational change, that's in that area. I've done big corporate. I'm well familiar with it, but FinTech world, people who may not have the experience that I brought to bear in the framework, they're really my sweet spot. That's where I want to target my efforts, because the big guys, they're there, they're doing their own thing. They've got vested interests elsewhere, whereas SMEs, who I can assist with my experience and the framework, is really that's my target area.
Okay, brilliant. And tell me how people should get in touch with you.
Well, you can get in touch with me at www.galapagosframework.com or www.digitalxform.co.uk. There's a contact page on there, or you can get me at brian@digitalxform.co.uk.
Fantastic.
I'd love to hear from anybody.
And we'll tag you into all the LinkedIn as well as we get this out. And I think, look, I love what you're doing. I love the stage you're at in the journey as well, as we were talking about recently. I think it's such an interesting area and problem to deal with. I think there's so much change going on digitally around the world, and I think that's going to only accelerate in pace. So getting this right, 2.6 is only going to go up unless something gets done about it as well.
True.
So being able to solve that and move it further forward, I'm all with you, and I think there's some amazing things that are going on with it, but I'm really excited by what you're doing. I'm excited to see the book as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
It's been great having you in today.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
And thank you all for watching. We will see you soon on another episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.